Have you ever felt like you've reached your limit? Like everything you worked for just fell apart? It's easy to think of failure as the end of the road, the point where everything stops. But what if failure isn't an ending at all? What if it's actually a lesson waiting to be learned? What if every time we fail, we are given an opportunity to grow? Let's explore the truth behind failure. Imagine you've tried your best, but it didn't work out. You fail. How does it feel? Most of us might want to give up or never try again. But here's the thing, failure doesn't define us. It's simply a sign that we were brave enough to try. So why do we let failure feel like the end? Could it actually be pointing us in a new direction? When we experience failure, the first wave of emotions we often face is disappointment, shame, or frustration. We've invested time, energy, and perhaps even our heart into something that didn't go as planned. Naturally, this can lead to feelings of defeat. Disappointment is often the first emotion we experience because we had expectations that didn't come to fruition. We wanted something specific, and when it doesn't happen, it's a hard pill to swallow. Shame can quickly follow. This might feel like a reflection of our inadequacy, a thought that we are not good enough or that our efforts weren't worthy. In a world that often judges success, failure can feel like a personal attack on who we are. Frustration is a natural consequence. We feel stuck, unable to move forward, like our efforts are wasted. This emotion arises when we realize that despite our best attempts, we couldn't reach the desired outcome. The frustration builds when we try to make sense of what went wrong, and this uncertainty creates inner conflict. Failure feels tough, right? We experience that gut-wrenching disappointment when our best efforts don't pan out. It's easy to believe that we failed not just at something, but that we failed ourselves. The sting of shame and the frustration that follows can make it seem like all our hard work was for nothing. In today's world, where success is celebrated, failure often feels like a complete setback. Everywhere we look, people seem to be succeeding, and society constantly rewards accomplishments. From social media highlights to the success stories we hear in the news, it's easy to feel like failure is something to be avoided at all costs. We live in an era where achievements are shared publicly, making it all the more difficult when things don't go as planned. Failure becomes a public event, and the pressure to keep up with the success of others can amplify the feelings of shame and disappointment. Society often portrays success and failure as extremes. If you're successful, you're good enough. If you fail, you're not enough. This binary way of thinking doesn't leave room for the nuances of learning and growing through failure. We're taught to focus on results, not the process. Failure is often seen as the end of a journey, rather than a necessary part of growth. In this fast-paced world, the idea of failure being a part of success can be hard to grasp, especially when we're used to quick wins and instant gratification. It feels like the world is always celebrating those who win, those who succeed. And in contrast, failure seems to be brushed under the rug, hidden from view. But here's the problem. When we live in a world where success is so loudly celebrated, failure can feel even heavier, as if it's a setback we can't recover from. Why does it feel like there's no middle ground? Why does failure seem like the end of the road instead of a part of the journey? One of the most challenging aspects of failure is how personal it feels. We often internalize failure, believing it speaks directly to our worth as individuals. When we fail, we may tie our sense of self-worth to the outcome of our efforts. If we don't succeed, it can feel like a reflection of who we are as people, causing a deep emotional response. Failure can trigger a fear of judgment, both from others and from ourselves. We might worry that people will see us as weak, incapable, or not good enough, which intensifies the emotional toll. Some individuals struggle with perfectionism, believing that anything less than perfect results is a failure. This can lead to a distorted view of failure, where any misstep, no matter how small, feels devastating. But what if we viewed failure differently? What if failure wasn't a judgment on our character, but simply a moment in time that helps us learn? Have you ever thought that maybe failure feels so personal because we attach our identity to the outcome? It's like we believe that not succeeding means we are not enough. But what if failure isn't a judgment on who we are? What if it's just a sign that we're doing something new and challenging, and that the path isn't always smooth? The most powerful question to ask ourselves in the face of failure is, could this be a step towards something better? Failure is often the greatest teacher. It provides us with invaluable lessons that success can never teach. Every failure forces us to adapt, reflect, and rethink our strategies. It's through these lessons that we build resilience and wisdom. What if failure is simply a redirection? Sometimes, not succeeding in one area opens up new doors in another. Failing at one path doesn't mean the journey is over. It could be leading us to the path we were truly meant to walk. What if we started to view failure as a tool instead of an obstacle? When we do, we can see how it strengthens us, helps us refine our approach, and makes us better prepared for success when it comes. Instead of letting failure be the end of the story, let's look at it as a part of the bigger picture. What if the failures we face are actually setting us up for something better? What if in each setback, there's an opportunity to grow, to learn, and to try again in a way that brings us closer to the success we want? In the immediate aftermath of failure, it's natural to feel disappointment, frustration, or even shame. But it's important to remember that failure is not the end. It's a lesson, one that teaches us about our strengths, our weaknesses, and our potential. Rather than seeing failure as something that defines us, we can choose to see it as something that refines us, helping us become the people we need to be to achieve our goals. So next time you face failure, instead of asking, why me? Ask yourself, what can I learn from this? How is this preparing me for something even better? Remember, failure doesn't define who you are. It's simply a lesson, and lessons always lead to growth. The journey isn't over, it's just beginning. Failure is often viewed as something negative, something we should avoid at all costs. But what if I told you that failure isn't the enemy? In fact, failure can be one of the most powerful tools for growth, self-improvement, and success. It's easy to assume that failure is a sign that we're on the wrong path, but that couldn't be further from the truth. Failure is, in many ways, a stepping stone that brings us closer to our goals, shaping us in ways success never could. When we fail, we often see it as a personal flaw, as if it's something we should hide or forget. However, failure is not a mistake. It's an essential part of the learning process. Think of it this way. Just as a blacksmith uses fire to shape metal, we use failure to shape ourselves. Each failure sharpens our skills, helps us gain experience, and teaches us lessons that are impossible to learn through success alone. Failure shows us where we went wrong, allowing us to adjust our approach. It helps us identify our weaknesses and gives us a chance to strengthen them. Failure pushes us outside of our comfort zones, fostering resilience and perseverance. Imagine trying to learn a new skill, whether it's playing a musical instrument, learning a new language, or starting a business. The first few attempts are rarely successful, but each failure teaches you something new, whether it's a mistake you can avoid next time, a technique you can refine, or a deeper understanding of what you truly need to improve. Without these lessons, you'd never move forward. Failure becomes a tool to guide you, much like a compass showing you the right direction. There's no shortage of inspiring figures in history who turned their failures into success. Let's take a moment to look at some of the most well-known stories of people who faced failure, yet never gave up. He's often credited with inventing the light bulb, but what most people don't realize is that Edison failed over 1,000 times before he succeeded. In fact, when asked about his many failed attempts, Edison replied, "I have not failed. I've just found 1,000 ways that won't work." Each failed attempt was a lesson that brought him closer to the breakthrough he needed. Considered one of the greatest basketball players of all time, Michael Jordan was actually cut from his high school basketball team. Can you imagine being told you weren't good enough for the team you dreamed of joining? Most people might have given up, but Jordan used that setback as motivation, pushing himself to become better. He later said, "I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times, I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed. I've failed over and over and over again in my life, and that is why I succeed." Oprah, who has become a media mogul and one of the most influential women in the world, faced numerous setbacks in her career. Early in her life, she was fired from a job as a television reporter because she was considered unfit for TV. But Oprah didn't let that failure define her. She turned her challenges into opportunities, ultimately creating her own empire. She has said, "Think like a queen. A queen is not afraid to fail." Failure is another stepping stone to greatness. These examples are just a few of the many stories of people who failed. yet refuse to let their failures define them. Instead, they use failure as a tool to grow, learn, and move closer to their dreams. What if the things we failed at were exactly what we needed to experience in order to grow? It's easy to think of failure as something that hinders us. But what if it's actually the very thing that pushes us toward the success we're meant to achieve? Every failure, no matter how small, has a potential to teach us something profound. Perhaps you needed to fail in a certain area so you could gain the right perspective or skill set for your next big step. Or maybe that failure was a catalyst for you to find a new path, one that leads you to a greater purpose. Think of a child learning to walk. They don't just stand up and run right away. They fall again and again, each time learning something new about balance, coordination, and timing. Without those falls, they wouldn't have the experience or strength to take their first steps. In the same way, our failures teach us the valuable lessons we need to succeed. Without them, we would miss the opportunity to grow and evolve. How many times have you failed and thought that was the end? Yet, looking back, you realize that failure was a necessary part of your journey. What if every setback you face was actually preparing you for something greater, even if you couldn't see it at the time? Failure isn't the end of the road. It's simply a part of the process that leads to growth and success. Instead of fearing failure or trying to avoid it, we should learn to embrace it as a tool for self-improvement. Every time we fail, we're gaining valuable experience that brings us closer to our goals. When we look at people like Thomas Edison, Michael Jordan, and Oprah Winfrey, we see that their failures didn't break them. They helped build them into the successful figures they are today. And just like them, you can use your failures to fuel your success. Remember, failure is not something to be ashamed of. It's a lesson that, when embraced, can propel you forward. So the next time you fail, ask yourself, what is this failure teaching me? How can I grow from it? What will my next step be? Failure is not the end. It's simply a lesson that can help you grow and become the best version of yourself. When we fail, the immediate reaction is often negative. We feel discouraged, defeated, and maybe even humiliated. But if we pause for a moment and take a deeper look at failure, we'll begin to realize that it offers us more than just a setback. In fact, failure can be one of the most important teachers in life. It's a tool for growth, offering lessons that success often cannot. Failure is not the end. It is an opportunity for growth. Resilience is the ability to withstand adversity, bounce back from difficult situations, and keep moving forward despite setbacks. When we face failure, it often feels like we've been knocked down. But every time we rise, we strengthen our resilience. Failure forces us to find the courage to get back up, dust ourselves off, and keep going, even when the path seems uncertain. Think of a time when you face a challenge. Maybe it was a project at work, a personal goal, or a relationship. At the moment, it probably felt like the world was crumbling around you. But with time, you found the strength to keep going, didn't you? It was that experience of picking yourself back up that taught you just how strong you truly are. Failure gave you the chance to practice resilience. It would not have been possible without the struggle. Failure teaches us resilience, the ability to keep going no matter how many times we fall. It's not about being invincible. It's about standing up each time we get knocked down. When we learn this lesson, we begin to realize that success isn't about never failing. It's about how quickly and how strongly we rise. Growth takes time, and failure is the perfect reminder of this. When things don't go as planned, we often feel impatient. We want to fix things immediately, get back on track, and see results. But failure teaches us something powerful. Not everything happens on our timeline, and that's okay. Failure teaches us patience, the ability to wait for things to unfold in their own time. It also shows us perseverance, the determination to keep pushing forward, no matter how many times we feel like giving up. Moreover, failure encourages adaptability. When something doesn't work out the way we expected, we have to learn to adjust, reevaluate, and try a new approach. This flexibility helps us become more resourceful and creative, preparing us for future challenges. Think about a time when a project or goal didn't go according to plan. Instead of giving up, you might have had to take a step back and change your strategy. That ability to adapt and keep going, even when things aren't ideal, is something that only failure can teach. Failure teaches us patience, waiting for the right moment to act, without rushing things. It also teaches perseverance, the drive to keep going even when the journey is long. But perhaps most importantly, failure shows us the power of adaptability. When things go wrong, it forces us to find new ways to reach our goals, becoming more resourceful and creative in the process. Success may feel rewarding, but it doesn't offer the same deep lessons that failure can. While success feels great and motivates us to keep moving forward, it doesn't teach us much beyond the surface. It can make us feel confident and validated, but it doesn't challenge us in the same way failure does. Success can be fleeting and sometimes even accidental. Failure, on the other hand, is a true teacher. It forces us to reflect, reevaluate our approach, and learn things about ourselves that we might never discover through success. What could failure be teaching you right now that success never could? Think about the lessons you've learned during your hardest moments. Have they made you stronger, wiser, or more empathetic in ways that success never could? Success may make us feel accomplished, but failure teaches us the deeper lessons, those of growth, resilience, and adaptability. Failure helps us understand what's truly important, and it teaches us things that success never could. In the face of failure, we often find out who we really are, what we're capable of, and how much we're willing to fight for what we want. It's easy to want to avoid failure. No one likes to fall short of their goals or dreams. But failure isn't a reflection of our worth or potential. It's a vital part of the process. Each time we fail, we learn something new about ourselves, our strengths, and our capacity to grow. Failure teaches us resilience, patience, perseverance, and adaptability. It challenges us to look beyond the immediate disappointment and reflect on what we can learn. In fact, some of life's most valuable lessons can only be learned through mistakes we make along the way. So, the next time you experience failure, remember that it's not the end. It's the beginning of a new lesson, a lesson that could transform your life if you're willing to embrace it. Failure is not the end. It's the beginning of something greater. It teaches us lessons that success can never offer, pushing us to become better, stronger, and more capable. So, what lesson is failure teaching you right now? Let's take a moment to reflect and embrace the lessons that come from every setback, knowing that each one is preparing us for greater success. Failure. The mere mention of it often fills us with discomfort, fear, and anxiety. Most of us would rather avoid it than face it. But what if, just for a moment, we try to see failure differently? What if we could change how we view failure? Not as something to be ashamed or feared, but as a natural and important part of the journey to success. How would our lives change if we could shift our perspective on failure? Could we see every setback not as a roadblock, but as a stepping stone to something greater? Let's explore this idea together. Often, the first emotion we feel when we fail is shame. We associate failure with weakness, inadequacy, or incompetence. Society sometimes reinforces this belief, telling us that only success is worth celebrating. But what if we could flip that mindset? What if we viewed failure as an opportunity, not a judgment? Instead of feeling embarrassed or worthless, what if we thought, I've learned something valuable from this? Shifting our mindset about failure requires a conscious decision. We must first recognize that failure is not a reflection of who we are as people. It's simply a result of a situation or an attempt that didn't go as planned. Think about it. When a child first learns to walk, they fall multiple times. Do we criticize them for every fall? Do we call them a failure? No, we cheer them on, encouraging them to try again. We understand that each fall is part of the learning process. Why should it be any different for adults? When we make mistakes or fail, it's easy to internalize it and believe that we're not good enough. But instead of feeling shame, we should remind ourselves that failure is an essential part of growth. It's an opportunity to learn, to refine, and to become better. Every mistake is a lesson in disguise. Failure is not just something that happens. It's something that we must embrace in order to grow. It's part of the process. The most successful people in history failed repeatedly before they succeeded. And they didn't see their failures as the end. They saw them as stepping stones. Imagine you're learning to ride a bike. The first few attempts are clumsy. You might fall, get scraped, or feel embarrassed. But does that mean you give up? Of course not. You understand that falling is a part of learning. Each time you fall, you get up adjust, and try again with more knowledge than before. Failure works the same way. When we fail at something, we gain experience that we didn't have before. We might learn that our approach wasn't right, or maybe we need to work harder in certain areas. But ultimately, each failure provides valuable feedback that can help us adjust our methods and increase our chances of success. It's important to remember that failure doesn't mean we're bad at something. It simply means we need to learn more. It's a natural part of the journey, and we must be patient with ourselves. Embracing failure as a learning process helps us become resilient and more capable over time. Viewing failure as a stepping stone rather than a roadblock transforms how we approach challenges. Instead of seeing failure as something that stops us in our tracks, we start to see it as a part of the path to success. Every setback becomes an opportunity to learn and grow, not an end in itself. Think about the last time you faced a setback. Did it stop you from pursuing your goal? Or did it push you to try a different strategy, to improve your skills, or to ask for help? When we see failure as a stepping stone, we stop allowing it to control our lives. Instead of being paralyzed by fear of failing again, we become empowered by the belief that failure is just another step towards achieving our goals. Every time we fail, we learn something new. We discover what doesn't work, and that brings us closer to finding what does work. Success is not a straight path. It's full of twists, turns, and detours. By seeing failure as a learning experience, we start to understand that each time we fail, we're actually getting closer to our goal. If we embrace failure as part of the process, what would happen? Would we stop being afraid of taking risks? Would we be more willing to push ourselves beyond our comfort zones? Could we even look forward to failure because we know it's an essential part of growth? If we change how we look at failure, it becomes less scary and more empowering. Instead of seeing failure as something to avoid, what if we embrace it as part of the process? If we stopped fearing failure and started learning from it, how different would our lives be? Every failure, no matter how small, could become a lesson that helps us achieve even bigger successes. Imagine looking back on your life and realizing that every time you failed, you didn't lose. You gained wisdom, experience, and resilience. Failure would no longer feel like an obstacle, but a necessary step on your journey. With every failure, you'll be one step closer to achieving your dreams. So, how will you look at your failures from now on? Will you see them as setbacks, or will you see them as lessons that are helping you grow into the person you're meant to be? Reinforce the key point that failure is not a reflection of your worth, but rather an essential part of the learning process. When we shift our perspective, we stop seeing failure as a permanent defeat and start seeing it as a temporary, valuable part of the process. Failure is not the end of the road. It's just another chance to learn, grow, and push forward. So, when the next failure comes your way, remember, it's not a roadblock. It's a lesson, and it's helping you build the future you want. Now, I want to hear from you. What's a failure in your life that taught you an important lesson? Share your story in the comments below. Remember, failure isn't the end. It's a lesson. Every setback is an opportunity to grow, learn, and come back stronger. So, don't be afraid to fail. Be afraid of not trying. Stay focused, stay determined, and keep moving forward. If you found this video inspiring, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more motivational content. Until next time, keep pushing past those obstacles and turning failures into stepping stones. Remember, failure isn't the end. It's a lesson.